Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest aliens and UFOs video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's continue the wonderful book UFO Sightings by Alan Baker, once again showcasing another part 3 of chapter 10, the one associated with the theme of bodies of evidence. So the last part we just wrapped up the information on the infamous Roswell video. This time it's going to go into another interesting segment, one that's called Tomato Man. Haven't heard of that one before. And then another one involving a one-legged alien. So interesting stuff to showcase here. Once again, it's going to involve evidence tied to strange bodies or aliens that have been found, and then some of their presences as well. So we'll see what it says, and then I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it as well. So again, this next segment is called Tomato Man. So here's what it says. Although the Roswell autopsy footage has become world famous, such alleged photographic evidence of dead aliens is not without precedent. Over the years, a number of photographs have surfaced purporting to depict dead or captured non-human entities. However, they are unfortunately more a lesson in the dangers of over-enthusiasm than categorical proof of an alien presence. The situation is made yet more confusing when the results of apparently genuine incidents are photographed, as happened in Laredo, Texas in 1948. It was not until 1978, however, that the photograph of the unfortunate individual referred to rather gruesomely as Tomato Man was released by Willard McIntyre, Charles Wilhelm, and then also Dennis Pilches, who belonged to an organization calling itself the Coalition of Concerned Ufologists of America. The photograph is extremely disturbing since this apparently shows the victim of a genuine accident who has been very badly burned and mangled, along with the twisted wreckage of whatever machine it was in when the catastrophic accident occurred. The body seems to have its back to the camera, so the face cannot be seen. The skin on the top of the head has been burned away, revealing a hideous mass of scar tissue covered with dark droplets of what is probably melted flesh. The victim's clothes have become fused with the body and are thus unrecognizable. The body itself is surrounded by burned wreckage, including wires, small girders, and struts. McIntyre, Wilhelm, and Pilches also released a story with the photograph, which claimed that it had been taken by a young naval photographer who was based at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. Since his job was to photograph aircraft crashes so that investigators could assess the wreckage for possible metal fatigue, he was ordered just over the border from Laredo into Mexico on July 7th to July 8th, 1948, to photograph a flying disc that had come down in the area. The highly respected American researcher Leonard Stringfield, who tragically died in 1994, learned that a UFO had been tracked on radar heading east towards Texas at 2,000 miles per hour. As it passed over Albuquerque, New Mexico, it was intercepted by two jets from Diaz Air Force Base, Texas. It is possible, although unsubstantiated, that the jets fired on the object, which then altered its course south and drastically reduced its speed to about 1,000 miles per hour, finally disappearing from radar at a point near the Texas-Mexico border. According to the unnamed naval photographer, the wreckage was still smoldering when the retrieval team arrived and began their examination. Curiously, he mentioned that the craft's construction included numerous nuts and bolts, although the metal itself was said to be extremely tough, apparently composed of a honeycomb lattice. The photographer took about 500 pictures of this wrecked vehicle and its hapless occupant. It was not until many years later that the photographer decided to release some of the photographs, having made duplicate negatives. When they were submitted to Kodak for analysis, the company concluded that they had probably been processed 30 years earlier, which would seem to support the photographer's story. As to the identity of the body, opinion is divided. Although a few researchers today claim that it is definitely an extraterrestrial being, two alternatives remain. First, that it is actually the body of a monkey that was used in an experimental V-2 rocket flight, which crashed just over the Mexican border. This is not as outlandish as it sounds, since monkeys were frequently used in the very early days of spaceflight to test prototype vehicles. However, as Jeannie Randall's notes in her book, UFO Retrievals, the wreckage seems to resemble more closely the cockpit of an aircraft rather than a V-2 rocket. There is also a very important element in the photograph that leads to the second alternative. Amid the wreckage and close to the victim's left hand is a twisted pair of spectacles. Not only does this definitely rule out an alien as the victim, it is also virtually ruling out a monkey. What we are left with is with the extreme likelihood that the Laredo photograph shows the unfortunate pilot of an experimental Air Force aircraft that suffered from a catastrophic malfunction and then crashed. It does seem equally likely that the stories of flying discs and dead aliens were merely the results of the ever-active ufology rumor mill, and as Randall suggests, may even have been encouraged by the Air Force to protect its top secret tests. The final nail in the coffin, if the reader will pardon the expression, of the extraterrestrial explanation for Tomato Man came when McIntyre claimed he had wanted to test the credibility of ufologists with the photograph. All right, and then the next segment is called A One-Legged Alien in Military Custody. Here's what it says. Another famous photograph shows what appears to be a captured alien walking between two military policemen. The creature was originally described as strange, with only one leg moving about a rotating plate. His arms end in four stubby fingers. Its head is large and oval, and there is some kind of breathing apparatus in the form of a tube running from its mouth to a box being carried by the MP behind it. However, according to German ufologist Klaus Werbner, the photograph is a hoax, an April Fool's Day trick arranged by William Sprunkel, then editor of the German newspaper Weisbender Tagblatt, for its April 1st, 1950 edition. The photographer was one that was named Hans Scheffler, whose 5-year-old son Peter stood between the two MPs to act as a kind of template over which the image of the alien was later painted. In the late 1970s, American UFO researchers were searching through some FBI files that had been released under the Freedom of Information Act when they came across a reversed version of the photograph. Although extremely grainy after much photocopying, the little alien and its custodians were still easily discernible. According to FBI papers, the photograph was received on May 24, 1950, from an intelligence officer at the New Orleans port of Embarkation. The photograph then found its way into the book The Roswell Incident by William Moore and Charles Berlitz, who included it without comment, thus adding to its apparent credibility. However, unlike the Templeton photograph described earlier, the one-legged alien photograph has most deservedly failed the test of time. And then let's do just one last segment, actually, called A Dead Martian, and here's what it states. In the year 1950 saw the perpetration of yet another famous hoax involving a dead alien, this time supposedly from the planet Mars. The tiny creature is shown being held up by its thin arms between two trench coat-clad Secret Service agents. The story was that its spacecraft crashed near Mexico City, and for some reason the dead pilot was sent to Germany for study. Early information on the photograph suggests it was taken in Cologne, perhaps as another April Fool's Day joke. Though there is something wrong with this photograph, it will become evident to anyone who gives it more than a cursory examination. For instance, the two men are holding the creature's tiny hands in their closed fists instead of between their thumbs and fingers, which would not have been natural. The Danish UFO journal UFO NYT examined the photograph and concluded that the men were actually holding the handle of a pram, which had then been painted out of the image. The scrawny alien had thus been inserted into the photograph. Later rumors had it that the photograph was actually taken in America. However, there are several members of the public in the background looking at whatever the men are holding, and this hardly squares with the American authorities' famous reluctance to display publicly their captured extraterrestrials. And then, actually, let's go ahead and let's wrap up this chapter. There's not too many segments left. Next one is called Another Autopsy. The vast majority of alleged alien photographs are, unfortunately, utterly laughable, and yet very occasionally a truly impressive image finds its way into the public domain and forces researchers to wonder whether this time they have found the long sought after final proof. One such picture showing a claw-like appendage and part of a torso was allegedly taken during the autopsy of an alien creature in 1962. The photograph is of relatively poor quality, yet it clearly shows a long upper arm, an elbow joint, a disproportionately short forearm, and a large clawed hand. Interestingly, before this photograph came to light, a former CIA operative claimed to have been present at a UFO crash/retrieval during which he saw the hand of one of the crew members. His description and sketch of the hand is virtually identical to this photograph. In addition, Leonard Stringfield interviewed a retired doctor who claimed to have performed an autopsy on an alien body in the early 1950s. He also sketched the appendages of the alien, and they were identical to the CIA's agent sketch. And then the last segment is called Montreal Hoax. There are times when certain ufologists play straight into the skeptics' hands, pointing to extremely dubious photographs as impressive evidence for alien reality. At times like this, the more responsible researchers in the field are left to limit the damage as much as they can, doubtless feeling great frustration at their colleagues' apparent lack of critical faculties. Just such a lamentable case occurred in 1990 when a photograph came to light which prompted the more zealous members of the ufology community to claim that it was a legitimate photograph of an alien body recovered at the site of the Roswell UFO crash and stored in Hangar 18 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The photograph clearly showed a small, hairless humanoid dressed in silver jumpsuit. The little man was strapped to a table and was apparently dead. However, the suspicions of the more discerning UFO investigators were raised when it became apparent that the jumpsuit contained an ordinary zip fastener. In addition, Wendy Holdsworth, a British researcher with Quest International, examined the figure closely and noticed the similarity between the clothing of the alien and the fabric used by cavers. UFO Magazine then arranged for some tests to be done on the type of cloth that Holdsworth mentioned, and it was found that it creased in exactly the same manner as this alien's jumpsuit. According to 14 Times editor Bob Rickard, the photograph had been shown off, at least in the fringe UFO circles, since 1970, when the Russian ufologist Marina Popovich revealed a black and white version at a UFO conference held in Munich, Germany. She claimed to have discovered it in the files of the late Professor Felix Zeigel, an eminent Russian space scientist. She also claimed that it had been given to Zeigel by none other than Dr. J. Allen Hynek at a secret Canadian conference in the 1970s. In spite of this intrigue, the actual origin of the photograph was discovered to be rather mundane. The little spaceman was a model that had been built as an exhibit at the Man and His World Exposition in Montreal, Canada, which was closed down in the 1980s. It is important to note that spurious evidence of this kind has always been shown to be wanting by discerning UFO researchers as well as skeptics. Serious ufologists are not afraid to pour cold water on dubious claims, showing up their lack of credibility for what it is. Indeed, it is clearly in the best interest of ufologists to ensure that it is done when necessary. The serious and genuine mystery of the UFOs demands that hoaxes are exposed as quickly as possible wherever they are perpetrated. And then that's it. That ends this chapter here, chapter 10, Bodies of Evidence, this being part 3. Let's go ahead and let's talk about those segments. For starters, Tomato Man. I haven't heard of that one before, but apparently it's a very gruesome photograph that showcases something, like the body of something that was apparently involved in a crash. A really gruesome photograph as well. After reading all this information, first gut instinct is that yes, I think this was unfortunately somebody, like a regular human, that was involved in some kind of a experimental spacecraft. But once they went down, obviously there was a lot of hush going on, like a lot of not talking about the incident, and so it was quietly brushed away. I think that's the case. That's what happened here. Otherwise, I think there would have been more discussions about it, like there would have been more stuff leaked associated with it, but who knows? But that's at least just the first gut instinct. But the other ones involving that one-legged alien and then also involving that dead Martian, it clearly showcases that those are more along the lines of altered photographs. Like, in other words, they were painted over images, and those are easily just removed. Like, in other words, they're not going to even be credible even after all these years. So at least it's good to showcase those, because there's stuff out there that's presented as evidence, but at the same time it isn't. And then there was the final segments involving an autopsy, how apparently there was a claw-like appendage that was drawn or captured, and then it matches what had happened with another associate, like somebody from a CIA agent, and what they sketched. I don't know about that one. I have to see more info. But the one involving the Montreal hoax is yet again something involving just a fake, like something that was painted or something that was shown. In this case, it was a little model of some sort, and that's the one that again highlights the importance of presenting skepticism to UFO evidence. It's the same thing whenever it happens in the world of ghost hunting, like the ghost group that I'm in. We clearly go for what's fake. Like, in other words, not fake, but what's not true. Like, if something shows up on our cameras, we immediately try to debunk it. Like, what could it be first? It could be a light, a reflection. It could be something else, like a piece of dust. It could be a fly or an insect, stuff like that. One by one, going through. And then finally, when we try to debunk everything, and that includes trying to recreate the shot to make sure that it doesn't have any falseness to it, then that leaves the possibility that it could be real. A good example is on a recent ghost hunt there at the Pioneer Village in Gonzales, Texas. We thought our footage captured a shadow person being reflected on some kind of mirror. But when we were doing a recreation, again, to try to debunk things, we realized that it was the shadow of one of us. Somehow, it was being cast multiple times over and then eventually landed on that mirror-like object. And when we were walking slowly, it walked slowly. When we walked fast, it walked fast. So it was clearly one of our shadows. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. All right, everybody, let me know what you think about this great chapter, Chapter 10, Bodies of Evidence. Have a great day, everyone. Take care. Bye.